Hello everyone, my name is Joe and today I will be going over the life and legacy of Aunt Lydia, the character from The Handmaid's Tale written by Margaret Atwood. I will be considering both the books and the TV show version of the character because both of them are important to understanding who she was. This video is very much inspired by the movie Flame videos, The Life of, which I have loved for years. Credit where credit is due. I will do my very best to be impartial and to be understanding of Aunt Lydia and her decisions over her journey in Gilead. However, I must say that even after reading the Testament, I do not like this character as a person. I do talk about my reasons in my review of the book, but I just needed to say that before starting narrating her life and legacy. Not much is known about Lydia Clements before Gilead. The story differs from the book to the show, so I will go over both of them. In the TV show, Lydia Clements gave up her job in family law to teach 4th grade students. She was a very religious person and often quoted Bible verses to the principal of her school. She was also a caring teacher to her students, and she paid special attention to one boy who apparently was being neglected by his mother. So Lydia took them under their wing and often invited them over to her house to have dinner, have a meal with them, and over time she became closer to them. One night, this mother, to thank Lydia for her help, did her makeup, helped her dress, and took her on a night out to have fun. On this night out, Lydia met the principal of her school. They flirted, they made out, but when Lydia made advances, he rejected her. And she felt so incredibly embarrassed and ashamed that she ended up taking it out on the mother of the student that she had befriended, and she reported her to the authorities, and this mother ended up losing the child. The child was taken away. This action was seen by the principal as not a great thing to do, so Lydia was even more humiliated. This is basically the backstory we get from the book about Lydia, the majority of it. However, the book is a little bit different, and to be honest, I do prefer it. In the book, Lydia is a family law judge. She works with a lot of cases of GBV, and at one point even volunteered at an R-word help center for victims. However, she had to give it up because it was too hard on her. In her past, Lydia has been married but then got divorced, and it's also mentioned that she at one point had an abortion. This is all in the book. And in the book, Lydia is taken by the Gilead guards as she is in the court working. And here we enter the transition period of Gilead, from overtaking the country to establishing a nation. During this period was when Lydia and her friends/colleagues were taken by guardians. They basically went into the court one day. They had all their information, their names, their experience, degrees, and their positions at the court. They took them into a van and drove them to a stadium that was filled with women like them. It was all high-ranking professionals like lawyers, judges, doctors, and this sort of male professions. Women working in these fields were all rounded up in that stadium, and she stayed there for days. During this time, regardless of the weather, all of the women had to sit outside in the stadium. If it was scorching hot, it was scorching hot. If it was raining, it was raining on them. They could not leave. They were given one meal a day, and during the night they would go back into the lavatory or locker rooms and just sleep. They did not have toilet paper, they did not have towels, they did not have toothbrushes or toothpaste. They had absolutely nothing to clean themselves and wash themselves with. They had to go to the toilet and clean themselves with their own fingers and then try their best to clean their fingers with their clothes. And they lived like this for days, potentially some of them more than a week. During this period, Lydia could do nothing else but dream of a clean toilet. When in her life in the past, she was born from a working class family and had to work really hard to get her degree, and she dreamed of being in a position where she could help women that have been abused or taken advantage of by men. Currently at the stadium, with not even a sheet of toilet paper, all she could dream of was a clean toilet. I think pretty much everyone can guess what they were trying to do to them. During the day when they were at the stadium outside, often there would be executions of women. In the beginning, it was guardians doing these executions, but a few days after Lydia had been there, women dressed in brown gowns started appearing to execute the executions. They would line up the women and they would have to take the shot. The first time this happened and Lydia saw women in brown gowns doing the executions, one of them turned to the guard just as they were about to shoot and shot the guard. Unfortunately, it was a blank and she was executed afterwards. This is the thing with this ritual of women in brown gowns. They didn't know if theirs was a blank or not, and they had to shoot anyway. This was the gist for days and days on end. During the night, they would often come to take women away. Lydia didn't know where they were going. She just knew that she never saw them again. And one night, they came for her. They dragged her out at night and took her to see Commander Judd. He offered her a brown gown. She said no, and they sent her into isolation. This cave of a place where there was no light, there were no people. She was alone for, she doesn't even know how long, potentially a few days, maybe a week. All she could hear were the screams of other women and the bugs crawling around her. She had barely anything to eat and nothing to keep her sane. After this isolation, they took her to a hotel room. She could use a clean toilet. She could take as many showers as she wanted to. She had salmon for dinner and was belly full for the next 3 days. She didn't have anything to dress, so she just stayed in her gown the whole time until one day a brown gown appeared on her room, on her bed, and she put it on. They brought her in front of Commander Judd again, and this time she said yes, and Aunt Lydia was born. Lydia wasn't a religious fanatic. She wasn't even extremely religious. She didn't believe in any of the mumbo-jumbo of Gilead about controlling women and the sinful past of women and their wicked ways. She thought about turning around when her time came and shooting the guard, but she didn't. It is never entirely clear why she chose the brown gowns. It was, I guess, in part to survive, in part to get revenge on Commander Judd for sending her there to that place, isolated from everything, from even her humanity. The only thing she truly ever says about it is, "What choice did I have?" And truthfully, she only had 2 options, to become an aunt or to die. And she chose to survive. If I'm being honest, I want to believe that put in the same position, I would have chosen to die. But I don't know. No one does. None of us do what decision they would make, and I hope I never have to make that decision. This is a hope that dies every day a little bit more. However, knowing the way her life ended, we have to question ourselves. Was everything Aunt Lydia did worth it for the end? Are her actions even justifiable because of what she did in the end? Do the means justify the end? But more importantly, when she chose to take the brown gowns and she chose to say yes to Commander Judd, was she even thinking of the fall of Gilead? I don't think she was. I think she was just thinking of surviving. After saying yes to Commander Judd, Aunt Lydia was brought into a room with 3 more aunts, and these were the 4 original aunts, the ones who not only started the Red Center, the Ardua Hall, but also wrote the rules of how these institutions would function. The 3 other aunts were Aunt Elizabeth, Aunt Vidala, and Aunt Helena. These 3 aunts, together with Aunt Lydia, were practically mystified and classified as legends within Gilead a few years later. They created the rules for how the handmaids will be trained, how they would behave, what would happen to them, and they created the rules for how the aunts would conduct themselves, how they would be trained at Ardua Hall, and everything in between. The aunts were the ruling class of the women faction of Gilead, and Aunt Lydia was their leader. Even though Ardua Hall was the main institution where the majority of the ants lived, where they were trained, where their systems were centralized, Aunt Lydia spent a lot of time at the Red Center training handmaids. This is where we meet June Osborne, the main character from The Handmaid's Tale, and everything that Aunt Lydia did to her and her friends. At the Red Center, Aunt Lydia was one of many aunts responsible for the re-education of handmaids. This re-education was basically telling women about their wicked ways and their sinful past as whores and sluts, and preparing them for their sacred mission as vessels of God to carry the children of Gilead. They were trained to obey and to be quiet, as they are rewarded monthly if they're lucky, whenever the commander wants if they're not. Each handmaid, after finishing her training at the Red Center, would be posted in a house with a commander to be impregnated by that commander and bring forth a child of Gilead. If handmaids did not behave, it was Aunt Lydia's job to punish them, anything from a cattle prod to being severely mutilated. Aunt Lydia and the other aunts throughout of Gilead did this to thousands, potentially tens of thousands of women during the 20-year period that the regime was operating. One of the women that Aunt Lydia trained at the Red Center was June Osborne, in the book called Offred, in the show recognized as June. After being posted, June got pregnant and managed to escape with her baby, named Nicole by the wife, to Canada. In the TV show, she allows her baby to go and stays behind in Gilead. In the book, she escapes with her baby to Canada. In the book, Aunt Lydia made sure to mystify baby Nicole as the most horrendous consequence of the betrayal against Gilead. Kidnapped by her sinful slutty of a mother, baby Nicole becomes a legend and a symbol in Gilead. A framed picture of baby Nicole is put on the walls of every school in Gilead as a reminder of what the wicked handmaids are capable of, as a reminder to hate them, as an excuse to treat them as subhuman beings. Through these and many actions, Aunt Lydia over the years quickly rose to power and became the leader of the aunts. Also over time, Aunt Lydia softened in the way that a person capable of all of this can soften, by her relationship to one of the handmaids, Janine. After torturing her for months and ordering her death by stoning, she got soft on her. Sorry, I'm trying to be understanding. She softens on Janine and eventually tries to protect her by keeping her in the Red Center and not posting her, but women don't have that much power in Gilead. It doesn't last, and Janine has to be posted. It doesn't go well, and as a mercy, Janine is kept at the Jezebels instead of being sent to the colonies. This is the beginning of the end for Aunt Lydia's loyalty to Gilead. She does not agree that she should be in the Jezebels. Eventually, Janine is posted again at the most sadistic, cruel commander in existence. And this is another thing that makes Lydia go over the edge. And eventually she does turn on Gilead. However, in the book, it isn't exactly explored how this happens, so we have to go with the show version. However, in the show, she never truly learns what she did wrong. She turns against Gilead by turning against the wicked, wicked man who abused those women. We can imagine that after Boston is retaken by Mayday, this is when Aunt Lydia creates relationships with Mayday and starts spying for them. This is about 6-7 years after the beginning of Gilead. During the next 8 years, Aunt Lydia continues to rise, continues to become even more popular and gain even more power, to the point where they erect a statue to her at Ardua Hall. She is also given a specific, very special room inside Ardua Hall where only she can have access to, and in this room she keeps books like Jane Eyre and other editions from the past. And it is in this little corner that is just for herself that Aunt Lydia writes the manuscript about her journey through Gilead, and everything that we know about her journey comes from this manuscript. During this entire time, it is assumed that Aunt Lydia is cooperating with Mayday. She has many channels of communication with operatives in Canada, And she even had the idea to use microdots, a very old technology that allows her to store large amounts of information in very tiny microchips that she passes to Canada through the Pearl Girls. The Pearl Girls are an initiative created by Aunt Lydia to establish a missionary mission to establish missionaries in other countries. Every single aunt that is training at Ardua Hall to be a full-blown official aunt has to go through the process of being a missionary overseas and bringing back one person to recruit to Gilead. Aunt Lydia manages to maintain contact with Mayday through the missionary girls, through the Pearl Girls, specifically through the pamphlets that they take with them to their missions to live in places in Canada as a way to publicize their service of being able to take lost people with them to Gilead to rehabilitate them. The microdots, the microchips are in these pamphlets, and this is how Aunt Lydia passes information. Well, one of the ways. About 7 years after the statue is erected, Aunt Lydia is starting to put into motion the plan that will be the beginning of the end for Gilead. This is in the book. In the show, this will happen about 4 years after the ending of The Handmaid's Tale. One of Aunt Lydia's main rebellions within Gilead had been to establish the system of punishing aunts. Many crimes were committed in Gilead. The corruption was seeping through its pores. Commander against commander, wife against commander, commander against handmaid, Martha against Martha, wife against Martha. The amount of crimes and corruption was beyond imagining, and Aunt Lydia could intercept some of them. Within the reach of her power, she had some capacity to punish the guilty, the criminal, the corrupt. One example is a dentist, Becca's father. Becca is Hannah Osborne's best friend in Gilead. The dentist was essaying Becca, his daughter, and at one point also essayed Anna. Aunt Lydia intervened and was able to punish him by taking him out of life. However, there was another man in a similar position committing similar crimes that Aunt Lydia could never touch, Commander Judd. So this is the balancing act that she managed to accomplish with her aunts, was to punish the men they could punish, and the women sometimes, and to simply bow down to those she could not reach. Regardless of whether she could reach them or not, the information of their crimes was kept. She had folder upon folder upon folder of every single crime she knew had happened. Color-coded folders, blue for wives, gray for Marthas, black for commanders, some other color for guardians. She had a gigantic amount of information proving that Gilead is a corrupt nation to the core and proving the inhumane and unjustifiable crimes that are committed on a daily basis in that country. And this is the documentation that she was planning to smuggle out of Gilead and into Canada as a way to bring down Gilead. Well, Aunt Lydia lets Mayday know she has them, and she's planning a way to smuggle them out, so they are communicating and planning a way to do this. 16 years after her birth, baby Nicole, now named Daisy and raised in Canada, is trained by Mayday to infiltrate Gilead and be the person that smuggles this microdot out of Gilead. All of this was planned and arranged for by Aunt Lydia. So Daisy, aka Baby Nicole, aka June's daughter, is brought back to Gilead under the rules of being a convert, brought back by a Pearl Girl. And while at Ardua Hall, she meets her sister Anna, who is also there training to be an aunt and has been there for years. And she also meets Aunt Lydia. Aunt Lydia arranges for the girls to meet and to get to know each other and eventually gives them the mission. Anna and Becca, who had been at Ardua Hall studying to be aunts for years, are just about to go on their Pearl Girl missions to bring back a rescue, a convert. So Aunt Lydia arranges for them to go and to take Daisy with the microdot on her arm with them. However, Pearl Girls only travel in twos, so only 2 of them can go. Anna and Daisy go, and Becca sacrifices herself for them. All of this arranged by Aunt Lydia. Through many complications, Anna and Daisy managed to escape to Canada and to bring the microdot all that information to Mayday. This is the beginning of the end for Gilead. The information is delivered and is publicized, chaos ensues, and Gilead becomes desperate to find the mole. This is a mole they had known existed for years and could not touch. They had no idea that it was Aunt Lydia. However, she knew that it would just be a matter of time until they found her, so she got her hands on a lethal dose of morphine. After everything we've seen her do to those girls, it's impossible to believe that this was her plan all along, that she said yes to Commander Judd and accepted everything she had to do from then on just to take revenge on him and bring the system down. However, whether it was through Janine or through something else, she did decide to flip and to align with Mayday and to eventually bring the whole system down and finally get her revenge on the people who tortured her 20 years prior. Lydia was a survivor. She knew when to stay quiet, and she also knew when she could no longer say no and stay alive. She lost her personhood, her humanity, everything she once held dear. She became one of the most feared entities in a nation of monsters. She was the person that parents used to threaten their kids to eat their broccoli at dinner. She was the monster. But eventually she discovered that you can't kill your humanity. It will always come crawling out of you and make you pay for your wicked crimes. Aunt Lydia never got to pay for everything that she did, but her final contribution to the rebel efforts was not forgotten. Her initials, AD, are still engraved in a statue erected to Becca after the fall of Gilead. The manuscript of her journey in Gilead throughout the 20 years of the regime was found in whatever remained of Ardwa Hall, as I said, 300 years later. But so far it is only speculation if the Aunt Lydia who wrote this manuscript is the same AD who was remembered at the Becca statue. This was the life and legacy of Lydia Clements, later known as Aunt Lydia. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please leave me a like, comment, all that fun stuff. And I will be doing more videos like this. The next ones will be Nick, Hannah, and Daisy for sure. All of the characters that will still appear in the Testaments will probably change, and I will just update the videos when the Testament is over. But for now, I want to do it with the information that I have, because I'm not going to let this story die. I'm going to keep talking about it until the Testaments comes, because come on, with what's happening in the world, this is more relevant now than ever. I keep saying that I never want to have to make the decision that Lydia made, because it's very possible that I will have to either stay and fight and face the consequences, stay and look the other way and face the consequences, or leave. At this point in time, if you remember everything I talked about Portuguese politics in the Handmaid's Tale videos, at this moment in time, the opposition party in my country is a fascist party. At this moment in time, the leader of government in my country is openly collaborating with this fascist party. And at this moment in time, the leader of the government in my country considers this fascist party as a future possibility to govern the country. It's getting real bad, and I will not shut up about The Handmaid's Tale and stories like this, because this is coming a reality and it's absolutely freaking terrifying. I will see you next time. Bye.